Hello students, for today's video we're going to be going over two topics. The topic you want to put on your paper is going to be absolute value and additive inverse. Okay, so it's additive inverse and absolute value is your topic for today, and make sure you put today's date. Okay. So since we're going to talk about two relatively short topics, I'm going to break them into sections. We're going to start with absolute value. So that's the first part of today's notes. It's going to be absolute value. Pause the video and copy down in your notebook what I have in my notes. And then when you're ready, unpause and we'll start talking about it. Okay, so absolute value. If you look here, hold on one second. If you look here, I have the symbol for absolute value. So you see the two bars with the X in the center. The X would actually just represent any number. So when you see that, you read that as the absolute value of whatever the number is inside, okay? So what is absolute value? Absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. Okay, so it's really important to keep in mind that when we're discussing absolute value, we're talking about distance. Okay, so here we have a number line, and we're going to just practice how we solve basic absolute value problems. So if you take a look here, we've got what is the absolute value of, and in between the two lines, we have a +2. So if you look back at the number line and we go to +2, which is right here, we're just looking to see what the difference is, what the distance is from +2 to 0. So it is 1, 2 units away from 0. So the absolute value of +2 is simply 2. Now we're going to take a look at the next one, which we have the absolute value of -2. So if you go to the number line and you take a look at -2, it's going to be right here. And what is the distance from -2 to 0? Again, you start at -2 and we go 1, 2, and we end up at 0. So it is also 2 units in distance away from 0. So what I hope you see is that regardless of the sign of the number that we're getting the absolute value from, your answer is always going to be positive because distance cannot be negative. Since we're referring to the distance from a number to 0, distance will always be positive. So when you're looking at absolute value, remember that you're talking about distance, and therefore your answer should be positive for that particular number. So let's take a look at the next one. We have the absolute value of a -43. Now, I don't have that far written on my number line, but again, I know this is talking about how far away -43 is. So if I was standing at 0 and I wanted to walk to -43, I'd go in this direction, but I'm still walking 43 units or 43 steps. So the absolute value for -43 is going to be a +43. So here we have a note, the absolute value of a non-zero number, so any number that's not 0, is always positive because distance is always positive, okay? Here we have some examples that we're going to go through. So for number 1, the question is, what is the absolute value of +8? Well, that is 8 steps away from 0, so that's going to be 8. Number 2, what is the absolute value for -4? So if I'm standing at 0 and I walk over to -4, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. The distance that I've taken, the units that I've walked, are a +4. Now you try number 3, number 4, and number 5. Try those 3, and then pause the video, try those 3, and then I'll do them. Okay, so Let's see if you got the same answers that I'm going to get. For number 3, negative 152, the absolute value of negative 152 would be a positive 152. The absolute value of 26 would be 26. Okay. So one thing I want you to notice is you're not flipping or switching the signs. If the inside the absolute value bars you have a negative number, your answer will be positive, but it will also be positive even if the number is positive. Okay. Some students end up switching. They think if it's positive inside, you have to make it negative on the outside. No, distance is always positive. Okay. Number 5, negative 36. The absolute value of negative 36 would be 36. It's 36 units away from 0. Okay. So now we're going to look at some problems that you could have in absolute value. Okay. If you take a look here, number 6, we've got the absolute value of 8 plus the absolute value of negative 5. So to do these, I'm just going to take the absolute value of each one, and I'm going to add them because there's an addition symbol in between. So the absolute value of 8 is 8, plus the absolute value of negative 5, which would be 5. And now I just add 8 plus 5, and that would give me positive 13. So why don't you pause the video, try number 7, 8, and number 9 without me, and then unpause when you finish to see if we've get the same answers. Okay, so number 7, we've got the absolute value of negative 20. That's going to be 20, plus the absolute value of negative 9 would be 9. I just add those two, and that would give me a 29. Number 8, the absolute value of negative 15 is going to be a positive 15. Plus, these are being added, another positive 15, that's going to be a positive 30. So for number 9, I hope you caught the difference there. These two absolute values are not being added, they're being subtracted. So I simply will have to subtract their absolute values. The absolute value of negative 25 would be 25, minus the absolute value of negative 10, which is 10. And I would just subtract those. 25 minus 10 would give me 15. So this is what you need to know for right now for absolute value. We will build further on this in class. We will also use absolute value when we're doing other things with integers and rational numbers. So it's important to understand absolute values so we can implement it a little in later lessons. Okay. Now I've run out of space on my page, but I write kind of big as you can see. So if you still have room, continue taking the notes that we're going to take now for additive inverse on the same page. If not, go to the next page. So now we're going to discuss additive inverse. And you've been using additive inverse pretty much your whole school life, but we're just now going to put a name to it and prepare to use it a little bit more in algebra. Okay? So additive inverse. Pause, take the notes down, and then press play when you're ready to listen and follow along. Okay, so additive inverse. We have some notes first that I want to go over. The sum is 0. The sum is always going to be 0 when we start working with additive inverse. The word sum should indicate to all of us that it is an addition that we're going to be doing, okay? So the sum will, and it will always equal to 0. The word is tell me that when we add, the answer is going to equal to 0. The second note says, when you add a number and it's positive, this is called the additive inverse. So this is a property that we're using called additive inverse, and it comes about when we take a number and you add it together with its opposite. Okay, we will definitely be using this in our next lesson, and we'll do an activity with it. But for now, let's just get the concept down. And so this is talking about adding a number and its opposite. Okay, so a number and its opposite. Well, that just means the number that is the same distance on a number line from 0 on the other side. For instance, Positive 3, so we're looking at this first example here. Positive 3 is 3 units away from 0 when you go to the right. And negative 3 is 3 units away from 0 on the left. So positive 3 and negative 3 are opposites. And when you add opposites together, you get 0. So if I have $3 and I spend $3, I have $0. Okay. And also if let's say I gain 9 pounds because I was having a great time over the holidays, and then I work out real hard and lose 9 pounds, I really haven't changed my weight much. I'm still at 0. There's no gain or loss there. Okay. The next one, we have a negative 14, and we're adding it to a positive 14. So negative 14 and positive 14 are opposites, and when you add them together, you're going to get 0. Okay. So you can pause and try the next two, but we know that the answer is going to be 0. Okay. So when you have two numbers and they are opposites, so one of them is positive, the other one is negative, be sure to understand that you're looking at them in addition. There is an addition sign in between all of these. They're not being, that's what additive inverse is showing us, that they're being added. So when you have two opposites and you add them together, that's called additive inverse. This should be very simple for you guys right now, although we will be using this when we're doing other algebra problems. So it's really great to know this property. It can help us do problems later, and it'll help us understand when we're doing other things with integers and rational numbers. All right, that's all our notes for today. So if you have any questions, write them in your notebook or send me a message on Remind, and we'll discuss this in our next class. See you later.